Hello, Michael here with another Redshift tutorial. Today we're going to be having a look at OpenVDB and how you would import an OpenVDB file into your scene and have it render with Redshift. So if you don't know how to install OpenVDB, the last video I recorded will take you through that. So if you haven't done that, go and do that. Otherwise, I've already downloaded some OpenVDB examples, which I'll just take you through how to render really quickly. So the first thing we're going to do is go to Redshift Lights, and we're going to add a physical light. And because the object we're going to be adding in is going to be volume, because it's going to be a cloud, we're going to turn the volume contribution scale all the way up to 1.0. Then we're going to go to Redshift again, and we're going to go to volume, and there's two options. You go create Redshift volume shape or create Redshift volume shape with material. So the difference being that this one just creates the sort of container for your OpenVDB object, and this creates the container and applies a volume material to it. So because we are going to want to do that straight off the bat, I'm just going to create one with a material, and we get this thing here, which doesn't do anything as it is right now. So we need to assign a OpenVDB file to it. So on the right here in the attribute editor, we'll go to file name, we'll go open. And if you've already been to openvdb.org, there's a couple of examples you can get there. I've got the bunny cloud example, and you'll see that it's made the bounding box a lot larger just by importing it in. And I'll show you, if you go to display mode, you can go to bounding box and points. So you'll be able to see sort of a rough approximation of what the shape or silhouette of your OpenVDB file is. So I'm just going to scale that down and point the light at it. And then also with this, just as a note, if you want to increase the detail of your of the points, you can just increase them. So say 60 would be a bad example, 60,000 would be a good example. So you can see it's a lot more dense now, and you sort of get a better idea of what's going on. This will probably start to slow down Maya if you get a bit too intense there, so probably 20,000 is fine for this one. Now if we rendered straight away, nothing's going to happen. I'll show you that actually. So as you can see, nothing in the render. That's because our volume shape, our volume material hasn't been set up correctly. So we need to go to the Hypershade editor and then go to the volume that we just created. I'll just map that out. And you'll see it's only got a very small node here. The first thing we need to do is essentially every OpenVDB file will have parameters that it pipes in, and that will be things like density, fuel, emission, velocity, depending on whether it's animated or not. If you've got like a sequence, this particular one only has density because it's just a cloud and it's static. So to have that visible, we need to go to our RS volume material, right click on the channel, and you'll see you get the option density. If there were other options, you'd see them there as well. You could literally just type in density as well and it would still do the same thing. And then if we render that, the cloud is now visible. I'll just zoom in. So I'll just go through some real quick parameters. Each OpenVDB volume that you open, depending on whether it's a cloud or fire or water or whatever, is going to be different. So there's not a lot of point in me trying to show you what exactly everything means, but there's some basics that you can be aware of. So the scatter coefficient is just how this light is being scattered. So if I increase that to 5, it's scattering more light. Absorption, you'll notice that it's got a channel name here like the channel does for scatter. Generally, if you're using density, which I think you're going to be using most of the time, absorption will use the same as the scatter channel. I believe it causes an error if you don't actually. So, but if you change the absorption to be something like 10, for example, you'll see that the cloud has become a lot more opaque. It's a lot more dense. It's absorbing the light rather than scattering it within the particles. But we could also set that by increasing the scatter to something like 5. I'm just going to put some geometry in the scene so I can show you some emission now. Alright, so I've just created a little sort of walled off area so we can see the shadow being cast and also light emission from our bunny. So if I go back to the material for our bunny and just scroll down a bit further to emission, we'll need to insert something into the channel. So I'm going to use density again. And then if you increase the scale of that, you'll see that it starts to become luminous. So let's do something like 2. Now, one thing you will notice is that the background is not being lit, and that's because we don't have GI on. So we need to enable that in the render options. Just go to GI, and then we'll use brute force on both channels. And now you'll see that our bunny is lighting up the scene rather dramatically. So you want to scale this back to something low. You can do that. Tint, obviously, you can tint the color. And then also you can use a ramp as well and get some pretty cool effects just by plugging a few different things in. And the Redshift documentation page is actually quite good for explaining these sorts of things, so I'll leave that to you to just go and check out. It pretty much covers all of the different effects that everything has for something like a cloud or something like fire, and I think that it would just be a lot quicker for you to just read through what they've got there, and a lot more interesting than me hearing me blab on about it in a video. So that's fine, we've got a fiery bunny, but what else can we do with OpenVDB? Well, there's already some presets in Maya for Maya Fluid, so why don't we have a look at those? All right, so now we're going to import a example Maya Fluid, so we can write an OpenVDB with that. So we're going to go to Windows, General Editors, Visor, and then you've got Fluid examples. You've got all sorts of things, clouds and explosions and smoke and space and all sorts of stuff. We're going to go with fire though. I'm going to use flame.ma. It's a nice small one and it'll be quick to cache out. Close that. So if you want to bring that into the scene, it's just middle mouse and drag on the example. I'm going to move that up just a touch. And then if we run through the scene, the time slider, you'll see that that is what we're looking at. Now, Redshift can't render that natively because it's a Maya Fluid. It doesn't know what it is. It doesn't even see it. So that's why we're creating an OpenVDB connection to it. And also I'll mention that I've reduced this down to 35 frames because I'm going to print out or cache out the 35 frames of animation of this particular Maya Fluid. So the first thing we're going to do is go to Windows and we're going to go to Node Editor so we can do some node editing. And then the next thing we're going to do is we're going to go to our OpenVDB shelf, click the OpenVDB icon, and we're going to create an OpenVDB from Maya Fluid because that's our Maya Fluid there. And on the right here, you've got the attributes, and it's got a bunch of different things that you can export with your OpenVDB. We're going to take density, that's going to be for like the smoke of the fire. Fuel will be could be a light source. You could also use temperature as a light source, and velocity for animation. So because we're printing out the 35 frames of this, we can actually get motion blur out of the fire effect. So we'll export that as an option as well, and I'll show you what that looks like enabled and disabled. The next thing we want to get is an OpenVDB write node. We can go to the shelf here again and select OpenVDB write, and that's just created it there. So if I open both of those up just by selecting them and tapping the 3 button, we can just do the OpenVDB output into the top there and go to other and go VDB input. And you'll see by selecting this one, you've got a write file. We can't actually write the file though just yet. One thing I forgot to mention is we'll need to select our fluid object, go to the flame shape, and the fluid shape name is what we want to get. So this is called flame shape. So we want to copy that, and then we're going to go back into our OpenVDB from Maya Fluid, and the fluid node name we're going to change to whatever that fluid name is. So that's fluid shape. So that's we want to change that to flame shape. All right. So here we're going to select where we output our VDB to. So we're just going to click the ellipses there, and I'll go to assets, and I'm going to do a new folder. This is going to be called VDB Flame 1 because I was testing this before. And with this, we're going to call it flame dot, and then because this is going to be an animation, we want to give it frame padding. So it's basically a hash per digit that you are wanting to export out to. So say if you've got 1,000 frames, you'd want 4 hashes. And it's generally just good practice just to have 4 hashes. Most frame paddings are up to 4 digits. If you're going over 4 digits, then you've got a crazy amount of animation, but just something to keep in mind. And then we're going to type .vdb and click save. And then finally, we're going to create an OpenVDB visualize node. So we're going to go to the shelf again, go down to visualize, and we get 2 nodes actually. We get the VDB read and we get the visualize shape. We're actually just going to go from the VDB output of our write node to our visualize shape, and we can just get rid of that one for now. So you'll see that our if you select your visualize shape node, you've got all this crazy sort of voxels happening. You can deselect leaf node, so that cleans up your thing a little, your scene a little bit easier, makes it easier to visualize. You could enable surface, and you'll actually need to go to VDB grid name and make sure you select density, and this will visualize whatever you've got selected. So if we went down to fuel, for example, you'll see that the fuel, which is where the fire is coming from, is the only thing that's being visualized. Density is usually going to be the easiest thing for this sort of thing to visualize from and get an idea of what your overall silhouette is. So you'll see that we've got our shape. It's been created. So now what we need to do is make sure that we play through the entire timeline just from frame 1, so it can render out the different the individual OpenVDB files for the animation and cache it out, and then we can re-import it into the scene. So I'm just going to go to frame 1 and click play, and that's done. So now I can show you in Windows Explorer where that's written to. Alright, so there it is under our RS Tutorials Assets VDB Flame 1. You'll see there is 35 different VDB files. So now we can very simply reintroduce these to the scene and render them. And I'll show you how to do that. So if you're happy with your with your fluid simulation, you could open a new file. I'm just going to delete everything that we've got here. So I'm going to select it all and just delete it. And then I'm going to do the same as I did before. I'm going to go to Redshift. I'm going to go to volume, create Redshift volume with material, select that, and I'm going to select a file name, go to assets, we'll go to flame 1 and we'll select the first frame, open that, and then we'll use file sequence, and you'll see that it's got frame number 35, so it's that's the final frame. So if you want to visualize it, just very simply, you can go to display mode, you can go to bounding box and points. And you'll notice that you're actually able to go forward and backwards in the timeline now, because it doesn't have to re-simulate from the first frame what is occurring. And the same as before, you can increase the max points to get more detail there. For motion blur, we want to go into the velocity grid, and we're going to right click on each field, and we're going to select velocity X for the first one, Y for the second, and Z for the final one. And then this is where we're going to actually create our motion blur. And you'll see in the info section, it's everything that we've written out for Maya to be able to read. Now, if you try and render this straight away, it won't work, because once again, if you go into the Hypershade editor, you need to have your volume, have your RS volume material have a density input in the channel. So we're going to right click and we're going to go to density. Then if we IPR that, you can see that we've got the smoke. Now we want to do a lot more to that, obviously, so we can increase that density to something like 5. We could probably leave the absorption where it is, and then emission is where we're going to make it look a little bit like fire. So we'll go to fuel, and you'll see that we're getting this glowing effect down the bottom there. And we can just use our ramp to create a fire effect very simply. So I'm just going to add a couple of spots in there, and you sort of want to balance out your intensity to get it to look how you like it, and also make sure. The thing also with OpenVDB to note is if you scroll through your timeline, it won't update in the IPR, as you can see there. So you need to rerun your IPR if you move it in the timeline. So if I just go to the end, go to IPR, you can see we've got pretty intense sort of flame thing happening. Something sort of more like that might look a little bit more believable. We could also go to our light and turn it off, and then we've just got a nice little flamey flame there, and the same. And like I said, I'm not going to get too heavy into how to make things look like fire and all that sort of stuff. There's plenty of tutorials out there by people who are much better at VFX than me, showing you how to do this sort of thing. So finally, what if we want to create a Maya fluid from scratch and visualize it and render it? I'll show you how to do that one now. Okay, so fresh scene again, we're going to go to effects and then we're going to go to fluids. I'm going to create a 3D container, and if I just scrub through the timeline, you'll see that it's created some smoke. And I'm not going to bother going into that and editing it or anything. That's fine for now. We're going to go into the node editor again by going to Windows and then node editor. And we want to sort of select our fluid and just run that in. And then you'll see you've got everything pertaining to the fluid there in the node editor. The only thing that we really want to care about is all this stuff here doesn't really matter right now. We actually are more concerned with time. That's where we're going to begin our chain from. So once again, we want to create an OpenVDB from my fluid, and we want to name it the same thing as what our fluid is called. So this is called fluid shape 2. So that means this needs to be called fluid shape 2. And we're just going to work with density and velocity, I guess, as well. Will make sense because this is animated. I forgot to show you in the previous example how to do that. I'll do this on this one. All right, and the second node we want to create is a write node. So I'm just going to select the port there, hit tab, go type in VDB write, and that will give us that node. We want to connect those two again. Select our VDB write node, and we're going to tell it where to write it out to. I'm going to go to assets again, and this is going to be called cloud1. And then we want a visualizing node, so we're going to go up here and we're going to go to OpenVDB visualize. It's created a node in a most annoying spot, and you'll see that it's got a read node connected to it. We don't really want that. We want that one to be connected. We can just delete the read node. Then if we have our VDB visualize shape selected, select density in the VDB grid name, we do surface, and we can deselect leaf. And then if we look at it in the viewport, you can see it being visualized again. All right, so then we're going to do the same thing again as we did before with importing the VDB that we're writing. So basically what's happening is every frame is being overwriting the file that we're creating. So that is going to be visible to the VDB read. So if we go to Redshift again, we go to volume, we create a Redshift volume with material. And that's that one there. We'll go to file name, we'll go to assets, and we'll go to cloud1. That's the cloud that we're creating. And we'll use bounding box and points. Now the thing with writing a node and reading it at the same time is that it's only going to show you the bounding box points for your final frame. So you'll see that it sort of roughly looks like that. So that's something to keep in mind if you're doing it with this method, but this is sort of a good way to, if you're quickly sort of rendering and prototyping your fluids, this is the way you might want to do it. So bounding box and points is fine for now. We're going to go to velocity grids, and we're going to select X, Y, and Z again. And then we're going to go to our hypershade editor. We're going to go to our RS volume that just got created. Go to scatter, go to channel, select density. I'm just going to make that 5 so it's very visible. So yeah, that is now rendering. You can't see it because it's on a different screen. That is now rendering. However, you notice it's sort of a bit messy. You could turn the fluid, you could make it, you could turn the display off, so that way you're not seeing both the particle effects and the VDB visualizer. It makes it a little bit cleaner. However, it does need to be visible in the viewport, so you can't just grab it and throw it away. Otherwise, it won't render your OpenVDB correctly. Yeah, and the other thing that I wanted to show you was motion blur. So if you select your RS volume node that we've just created, and then go to velocity scale, you can just increase that to say 2, and you'll see that started to blur it a little bit. I'll just really overkill it, turn it to 20, and you'll see that's gone crazy. So usually you want to do that in small increments. It might be like something like 1.2 to get it to blur just a little bit. It's sort of a little bit more obvious with the fire effect. Sorry, I forgot to do it when I was doing that one. But this will pretty much pretty much shows you how it works anyway. So yeah, that's pretty much all there is to it. Hopefully that was straightforward enough for you all to follow. I tried to keep this one as quick as possible because yeah, it's if you know how to use Maya fluids, if you're good with VFX stuff, then learning how to hook all this stuff up is the easy part, I assure you. So yeah, that's really it though. So if you liked this tutorial, make sure you click the like button so other people can find it on YouTube. And if you haven't already, make sure you're subscribed for more videos just like this one twice a week at least. That's it for now though. Thank you very much for watching. And also make sure you're following on the Facebook, just if you want to get more recent up-to-date updates, you will get them there. So Facebook, I keep forgetting to tell people, but that's where it's at. But if yeah, that's it for now though, so thank you very much for watching and happy rendering.